$1 million is kind of our target, right? So that's a lot for some people and it's not very much for other people. So let's just use that as kind of our number that we're raising for these examples. So you're raising $1 million. How many people is that? Is that one person giving you $1 million? Is it 10 people giving you 100,000 on average each? What does that look like? Because the more investors you need, the more people you need to talk to. And I was actually shocked that you only had 17 people. This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Garrett, my friend, my co-host, how's it going?
Good, man. Good to see you. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. I've been enjoying seeing the podcast get a little bit more traction over the last few weeks because this season 2, I think we're opening up some topics that are maybe more applicable to more filmmakers. And so at least on my end, I'm seeing more response and more questions and more feedback. And so it's good. We have time to focus on growing a podcast and not just putting movies in theaters.
Yeah, it has been fun, and we're cutting it up into different clips and putting those on YouTube Shorts. And thank you to our listeners and subscribers for continuing to share and watch and download and subscribe and talk and even reach out.
Yeah, that's really how podcasts grow is people tell other people about them. So if you like this one, tell your friends. Today, I'm excited because we've kind of set ourselves up for being like the authorities on different aspects of the filmmaking process, inadvertently or not. We had a pitch episode recently that has gotten a lot of good feedback. And so today we thought about focusing on fundraising. This is probably the number one topic I get requests of. How do you do fundraising? How do you raise money for your projects?
And I'm excited about this episode because it comes at a good time. I mean, we're kind of following along our own path to, starting our next film. Hopefully season 3 we'll get into pre-production. But yeah, fundraising is kind of this ugly necessary requirement that any filmmaker is going to have to go through in order to be able to make a living doing this. And so there's a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack and a lot of mistakes to be made.
Yeah. So kind of if you're following the path that we've laid out over the last few episodes, like you come up with an idea, or maybe you have a number of ideas that have been sitting in a drawer or on your desk or in a folder, and now you've picked one or multiple that you want to go out into the marketplace for and shop around, this time to find investors, not necessarily to find distribution or to find the audience, but I think someone in an earlier episode mentioned different types of audiences, and this is like the first one, which is your investors, the people that are going to buy in at the earliest stage, give you the money you need in order to finance the production and hopefully the marketing and distribution of the film. And so, how do you do that? Like that's what today is about. We've got a few ideas, and these are based on both of us raising money for multiple projects over our careers, and so we have some experience doing this. And we're gaining more with each time that we go out to the marketplace and raise money. So we're in it as well.
I think, Darren, I think that there's a lot to talk about there as far as identifying who to talk to and then also knowing what to raise, how much to raise, and again, what your project is. So hopefully these episodes of season 2 have helped like get us to this point where we now have a pitch deck. We've kind of refined our pitch. We know what we're talking. We know what we're essentially selling or going to create. And now it's a matter of inviting the right people on board, whether that's a network or an independent investor or your friends and family. So let's talk about all of that. Do we want to address movies first? I mean, I know we talk about movies sometimes on this podcast because we love movies. That's what this is. But we certainly don't want to derail what we're doing. But man, we've seen some good movies lately.
Yeah, I think we've sufficiently hooked the listener, and so they can skip to the next chapter if they want to. But yeah, movies are in full bore right now. There's so many great movies that are out and that are coming out. I've seen probably the most movies in November than I've seen in the last 6 months. So I saw like 4 movies in 2 weeks between the week before and the week of Thanksgiving.
I'm jealous, but I'm just only a little bit behind you.
Yeah, that's okay. I used to be in the cadence of like every Friday we would, if we had all of our projects done when my old business partner Alan and I were working together, we would just say, look, everything's done for the week. It's 12 o'clock on Friday. Let's go catch a movie at 12:30. And
Yeah,
then we'd be home by the time our kids were home, and it worked out great. But
yeah.
not in that cadence anymore. There's too much to do on the fundraising forefront. So I've been doing that more than watching movies. But one that I loved, because there's a lot of big movies out and they're great. Like Gladiator 2 was awesome. Moana 2 was fine.
Love
But
Wicked.
I haven't seen Wicked. We're going on Thursday. But Juror number 2. Have you seen Juror number 2?
So I watched Juror number 2 last night,
Oh,
and I, as a member of the Producers Guild, I get these screeners, and
mhm.
I love it, and it's so fun to sit down and watch a movie at home. But so I didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters. But my goodness, I could not wait to talk to somebody who had seen it, and so I'm so glad you have.
Oh man, that's my kind of movie. Like a slow burn, where you know from the inciting incident, as soon as that happened in that movie, I knew I was in good hands with Clint Eastwood because it was so good and the reveal was so unexpected. Like it was not projected or telegraphed at all. You just kind of you felt the reveal in the same way and the same time as the character.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
It's hard to talk about without spoiling it, and so we will not spoil it. Clint Eastwood directed, starring Nicholas Hoult, and just this it presents this incredible moral dilemma that I agree with you. I just love those slow burns, and there wasn't anything fancy. There wasn't a lot of spectacle. It was just a well-made film. Clint Eastwood is what 94 now. They say this is probably his last film. Warner Brothers put this out in theaters last month and really didn't do much with it as far as advertising or promoting or anything like that. So find it and watch it and just process. It's such a great film.
Yeah. The thing that I love about that is it's a movie that I don't want to say anyone could make, but you could make that same movie on a
Yes,
budget. You could
that's
make
what I
that
kept
movie
thinking.
for 150 grand. You
That's
wouldn't have name actors, you wouldn't have the same production value, but there weren't visual effects in that. There weren't, I mean, there were special effects, there was some blood and there was some car incident, like car crashes or car screeches or whatever. But like overall, that's a movie that could have been an indie
I've
by,
paid very close attention to that. Yeah, and
yeah,
even this car incidents were mostly off screen. They were
yeah,
just suggested, and there
sound
was sound
effects.
effect. And I just thought, yeah, there is no reason that somebody couldn't make this film with the resources that they have available to them on their phone and stuff like that. I certainly don't want to speak poorly of the production quality because it was very well made, and they had name actors throughout. But the story, they found such a story that was so accessible and just doable, and we didn't get distracted with the spectacle of things. On
Yeah,
the other, yeah, on the other side, it's no Wicked. Wicked is just incredible, and that's what people are loving about Wicked. So there's room for all of that. So yeah, if you have the budget, do it. But if you don't have a budget now, that's no longer an excuse. You can make a great courtroom drama um, that still is just totally captivating.
yeah. The estimated is that it was a 30 to 35 million dollar budget, which is outside of the realm of an indie in my mind. Like
For that film,
for Juror number 2, I see 30, I see 35, so it's somewhere in that area. IMDb has it as an estimated 30 million. You could do that for 3, you could do it for 300,000. That's not to discount the movie. What I
right?
think it does is it shows what you get when you get a name director and name actors. J.K. Simmons is in it, Nicholas Holt's in it. Like it's a really great cast, and everyone pulls their weight. It's so good, but there's a version of that. Like I don't know why this is sticking out as the thing I want to talk about, but like it just shows that the power of the story is accessible to anybody,
Yeah,
and that's exciting for indie filmmakers. So check it out on streaming when it's on streaming. I don't think it's in theaters anymore. It only made like $9 or $10 million in theaters, which is unfortunate. They kind of just dumped it into theaters, which it deserved more. I think it could have been a 80 or $90 million take because it's a really good movie.
yeah. Well, we can segue from that. That is directed by and produced. It says right there in the first card that comes up is produced and directed by Clint Eastwood. Now, he's obviously a name director. Obviously, you know, been around for just done so much. And what my favorite Clint Eastwood story, and this segues into raising money, I'm going to get into that, is on Oscar night, was it 97 or whatever, when Million Dollar Baby, I guess is more recent than that, Million Dollar Baby wins Best Picture, right? So Clint Eastwood directs Hilary Swank in this boxing movie, and Morgan Freeman's in it. And he stands up to accept his Oscar for Best Picture. And in his speech, you can go back and watch it, he talks about, he says, please keep giving these little films a chance. Like he's talking about fundraising for his next films. And this is Clint Eastwood, right? That is asking for funds. And he's just made the best picture. So what we do as filmmakers as far as fundraising is part of the gig, right? That's just, if we're going to produce movies, there is no way around that. We're going to be fundraising.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you don't have to be, he's the 12th highest grossing director in the world. So you don't have to be Clint Eastwood, but even the 12th highest grossing director in the world still has to have that kind of mindset around it. So why don't we dive in? We've got at least 3 things that we want to talk about. And the first is kind of pre fundraising, right? Before you start making calls, before you start taking lunches, before anything else, you want to have some sort of tracking sheet. I call it a tracking sheet. I think you have a different name. But the idea is that you have a place where you can store all of the information of the people you're going to be reaching out to. So, my tracking sheet very simply has across the top, these are the columns: name, phone number, email address, what's their company, what's their industry, and who did I get an intro from. I like tracking that because I want to say thank you. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy people a gift card to a restaurant, or I've bought people $500 gift cards in the past to Apple. Like if people connect you to money, you should take care of them and make sure they know that you appreciate it. And then I have kind of a, where are they at in the process? So have they been contacted? Have they received a pitch deck? Do we have an appointment set up? Have I pitched them in a meeting? And then what was the result? And I've got some drop downs of like, are they in? Are they a bridge, which we'll talk about in a minute? Are they out? Are they not now? And then have they committed and have they closed? And then I have notes and follow up and stuff like that. So I know you do a similar thing, or you at least follow the same principle. Let's talk about, how do you do it?
Very similarly, I mean, and you've almost just read I call mine an investor blue planner tracker, and it just helps me. Again, we know that we're going to be talking to a lot of people. Like the question is, why do you need a tracking sheet? Just go, talk, and whoever responds it. And I've kept my tracking sheet for all of my films. So I've got from Saratov approach. I've got if I highlight it, I spoke to 17 potential investors that are at least on the tracking sheet, right? And they only are on the tracking sheet if there is like some sort of invitation made. Hey, can we set up a meeting? Can we set up a lunch, or can I take you? So I got 17 potential investors and ended up raising money from 5 of them. So I can go back to all 7 of my films, and these are the people I've talked to, and some names appear on the Blue Planner multiple times for multiple films, and others have just been involved in a couple, and then move on to different things. But yes, it's important to track, because there will be 15, 20, 30 names per project, and most of those are going to be no. But I think it's important to maintain a relationship with them even after the movies are out. You're going to email and say, hey, thanks for letting me take you to lunch, or thanks for letting me talk. Love to invite you to the movie, and still be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you highlighted something interesting, which is how many people are you expected to talk to, which I think is a good, prior to reaching out to people, thing to think about. So if you need to raise, let's just use $1 million as kind of our target, right? So that's a lot for some people, and it's not very much for other people. So let's just use that as kind of our number that we're raising for these examples. So you're raising $1 million. how many people is that? Is that one person giving you $1 million? Is it 10 people giving you 100,000 on average each? What does that look like? Because the more investors you need, the more people you need to talk to. And I was actually shocked that you only had 17 people that you talked to. Like that to me seems so low, which means you had a really compelling project and you've targeted the right people. So we should talk about those things. But my recommendation to everyone I talk to is like, you're going to need to talk to at least 100 people minimum.
Yeah.
And that's the
Well,
plan.
and yeah, and if you're looking at $1 million budget versus $100,000 budget, then yes, I think the number of people you need to talk to goes up.
Yeah.
You look at Saratov, and that budget was only 125,000, so the ratio works out.
Yeah. Well, and well done again. Like I'm sure I've said this to you in the past, but you did a lot for 125K and it was a very successful movie. So I think you want to at least have the idea of I'm going to reach 100 people. And do you want to do that in a week or a month or 6 months or a year? Like how long is it going to take you to find those people? And it can't just be that these are 100 people you sent a DM to. I mean, you need to like pitch 100 people. Like,
Yes, and that they had to, even to get on the list of hey, I'm going to track this. It had to be like, hey, they took a meeting or something like that.
yeah,
I could probably do a better job. I probably should put everybody's name. Hey, send a DM and a no response or just a no thank you. At least I should probably track that so I don't do that again.
I don't know. I don't track the people that I've done an initial message outreach to
Okay.
because to me, that's not real until they respond positively or I get an intro to somebody or I've met them in person and they're like, yeah, let's chat. Then I'll put them on the sheet so I know that I'm not going to drop the ball when it comes to following up with them and checking in with them. So, I mean, literally yesterday, I was in this sheet for 3 hours following up with the 23 people that are currently on it and saying, hey, hope you had a good holidays. I'd love to meet up this week. Or there were two that I'd already pitched. And I said, hey, would it be crazy to think that this is an awesome opportunity and it would be so much fun to have you in the fund? And both of them responded positively. They're like, actually, we're talking about it. So thanks for following up and we'll get back to you. It's an answer, but not an answer. And I was like, great. But we'll talk about those things as well as we get later on when you're actually pitching people. But we talked about that 2 episodes ago too. So
Is
yeah,
track your people, right?
track your people.
Get some sort of way to track it, a Google Sheet, whatever it is, spreadsheet, Blue Planner, do
Yeah.
it.
And update, one of the important things to update is like, when did you last talk to them? And if it's been more than a week, you should be touching base with people every week at minimum. In my opinion, if you're if you're serious about fundraising, there needs to be a sense of urgency about it. And if you wait 3 weeks and you go, "Hey, I'm just checking in. How are you doing?" That's not an urgent thing. Like you want it to feel like this is happening now, and if they don't pay attention, they might miss out.
What
Uh,
are some ways, I agree. What are some ways that you have created that urgency? I have a couple of ways that come to mind. How have you created that for people
yeah.
without just coming across as like, just give me, I don't know why we want to fast, just give me.
Well, part of it is the framing of the whole conversation. I am raising money and I'm looking to get all the commitments in by the end of December. Oh, okay. I get it. You're actively raising right now and you want it done in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Cool. If that timeline doesn't work for them, if they're like, oh man, follow up with me in 6 months or now's not a good time, it can sound cold, but like I don't want to spend time with them if they're not potentially even able to invest right now. So that setup, the framing of the whole conversation. Hey, I'm reaching out, I'm raising money for XYZ project, and I'm looking to connect with people this month because I'm putting the whole thing together by the end of December. Well, if they respond with, dude, thanks so much for thinking about me, but now's not a great time, great. They're not even on my list. I'm not going to follow up with them. Or I'll update the list and saying, not yet, because that's one of my drop downs. So the framing of it, I think, is paramount.
Yeah. I've used deadlines, but not only just like an end of year deadline, but production. Like, hey, we're doing a movie that is shot in the fall, and so we are raising money, and the final collection date or a collection date is July 30th.
Yeah.
Would you be available for a meeting or whatever it is? I guess we've already had that conversation about giving dates, but if we don't reach our deadline, then we don't do production. And so
Yeah.
that's something that creates a level of urgency.
Yeah, that's part of the framing. I heard or I read a great email. So I'm just going to read this out because it's so great. And I think some of the framing is in there. The subject line gives some context. I'm a 4-time film producer raising for XYZ project. So and so sent me, or would love to connect, right? It's just in the subject line because some of the people you're going to talk to are very busy people. Let me just read this real quick and maybe I can even copy paste it, put it in the show notes or something. Hi, so and so. I'm an independent film producer based in Utah with 4 features under my belt, 2 of which were just in theaters in fall of 2024. Okay, this is a person worth listening to, at least to hear what they say. That's enough to get them to read the next sentence.
Sure.
I'm seeking investment for XYZ project, a 1-line detail about the project. I'm attaching a short pitch deck with an overview of the project and would love to discuss it with you. My cell is numbers. Who on your team should I coordinate with to schedule a brief Zoom or phone call? That's the email. That's like a cold email, but think of the framing there. Like this is happening now. I probably could even put more in there like I'm raising this month. I'm doing it by the end of December. That's not in there, but this is more of a template that I can use anytime instead of in December. So I would probably add that in the email.
Mm. Yeah, that's nice. I mean, and everybody's going to have their own approach and their own way, but and certainly not everybody's going to be able to say, "Hey, I've had I've done 4 films or whatever it is." And so I think you really do a good job of highlighting who you are and your selling points, and then being very direct. I think that's awesome, and that says a lot. It's important, I think, not to dance around. Don't be afraid of talking about money. That is such a it's a delicate thing. It's like, oh well, how much are you raising? Oh, I don't know. I don't want to offend. Don't want to ask for too much. That doesn't make a good producer. Like a producer has to be comfortable having those conversations. Like that is the thing. We are raising $300,000 for a feature that we're going to film in Africa,
Yeah,
and
that
yeah,
should be a line
and
in
it
your email.
starts in chunks of $20,000 or whatever it is. It's like we are looking for 5 investors for our raise of $1 million.
Hmm.
Would you consider being one of those investors?
Yeah,
Boom. Yes or no. Like that's easy. And now I can talk about money and I don't have to hem haw around, and dance around the subject of what that is.
exactly.
Those conversations that you now are having at the table are are going to be about money. People are going to
Yeah.
want to know how they're going to make their money back or where their money is going.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, so everybody write those down,
Uh,
copy them, use them. This is
I was on
great.
a soapbox there for a second.
No, I love it. Okay, so you've done that, right? So you've got your tracking sheet built. Again, this is not you don't need software for this. You don't need to pay 10 bucks, 20 bucks a month for some app. Just put it in a spreadsheet and keep track of the people that you're reaching out to and talking to and where they're at in the process. So step 2, I this is again maybe more of a mindset thing, but I like the idea of finding the leverage. And so, similar in our pitching of like, it's going to take you 100 cold DMs to find one person who's going to, receive a pitch or take a pitch from you. It kind of is the same in fundraising. Like a cold message is kind of the lowest form of spending your time, like the lowest leverage. So I like looking for high leverage ways to spend my time. And one of the best that I've found is to find what I call and what others have called bridge connectors or
Mhm.
bridge investors or bridge people. Meaning who has the audience or the network or the friend group of the people that I want to talk to
Yeah.
for this fundraise. So if I need to talk to a bunch of angel investors, people that invest 25 to $100,000 in projects, well, who already has a list or a group or connections to a bunch of angel investors? I would rather spend an hour finding one person who can connect me to 5 or 10 or 50 people than
Mm.
spending that hour DMing those 50 people on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I could be better about that. You're very good at networking, and I've attended some of those events with you. Yeah, you identify those bridge people, and you do a great job at that. That's a good tip. I don't have any notes on that
Yeah.
or
So,
experience doing
how
it.
do you implement this? I think is the next part. And one is like, okay, you can just look at LinkedIn is a powerful place. So I'm going to recommend everybody that's trying to raise money get on LinkedIn and spend some time there. But you could identify, you can literally go on LinkedIn and type in the search bar, angel investor within a second degree connection of you, and you'll probably get 2 or 3 thousand people that pop up. So what you want to look at is not how do I DM 2,000 people? Are there names that pop up that are like shared connections? So if you keep seeing the same person, like, oh man, Garrett knows Jeremy and Mark and Lucas and Amy and Judy, and like if I'm connected to you and you're connected to 5 people that are on my list, man, the first thing I need to do is talk to you about those people. Hey, I'm raising money. I noticed that you're connected to these 5 people on LinkedIn. You know, how strong of a connection is that? Are these people you could potentially introduce me to? Right? That requires that I have that kind of relationship with you, which I do. I'm not going to message somebody that I became a connection on LinkedIn in 2009 and say, hey, buddy, can you introduce me to your 10 rich friends on LinkedIn? That doesn't work. You have to have actual relationships. So that's one. But the second, which is also really, really powerful, is the idea of events. And so if you don't have any networking events, you can create one. I did this in October. I took a list of 90 film producers that I was already kind of managing, a Utah film producers group, and I said, well, let me invite 30 investors or startup people or CEOs that are in tech, and let's get these groups together. And we did that. We had about 65 people show up. There were probably 15 or 20 on the outside of the film industry, and the other 45 or whatever were inside the industry. And we had a great event, right? So if you don't have events to go to, you can create them yourself. But I've been to half a dozen events in the last 3 weeks that are literally put on for investors, like investor groups, angel groups, startup investors, founders and funders, like all these different types of events that are just happening because we're in Utah and there's a lot of that energy and that stuff that happens here. So I can go to an event, but rather than just showing up and then saying hi to the person I'm sitting next to, what I do is spend an hour or two getting to know the person hosting the event because they're the bridge. So I'll spend an hour or go to an event that I know this person's going to be at, and I'll get to know them so that when I come to their event, they go, oh, Darren, you're here. Hey, you should talk to so and so. Boom. Now I'm, like we talked about in the pitch episode, I'm at the same level as the person running the event. I'm a friend of theirs that they are now introducing me to. And this works every time. Like every event I've been to, I've met at least one person that the host introduced me to that led to a conversation. And so in my mind, the hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever the total time, doing that is way more effective than if I had tried to DM that same person on LinkedIn rather than going from a bridge to an introduction to a meeting.
Again, this is all new to me, and I'm just absorbing it in. I went to LinkedIn while you were talking about and did that. Typed in angel investor, and in my first and second, whatever it is, levels of connection, there there's a full page. There are pages of people that fit what you've just described.
Yeah. So I would avoid, or I would admonish,
Advise.
I would tell people that listening, don't just take that list and start DMing them. Take the
Oh,
time to find a bridge, find an introduction, find a way to make a connection that isn't directly, will you give me money? Is the subtext.
yeah.
So don't do that. Find a bridge, find a connector. That is leverage that will make it so much more effective to have meetings that end up in investment because you've already got the stamp of approval from someone they trust. So I think one introduction is worth 100 cold DMs, if not more.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the
So
Sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. What's next?
Well, I don't know if it's going to shift gears or if it's next on the outline. And so I want to talk about the mindset of what we are offering and having confidence in that.
Mm-hmm.
So if that goes now, great, I'll do that. If you have another step in your outline, I'll wait.
No, I love that. I love that. Why don't you start? And I've
Y-
got thoughts.
What spurred that is that, you've suggested, you said, the conversation is, will you give me money? And we say that kind of lightheartedly, but because that's what it feels like we are coming to the table with, like, hey, can I take you to lunch to ask you to give me money or whatever it is? Let's talk about this film or this great idea so that you will give me money. And I think that where in doing this 8 times, raising money for 8 different feature films and then a number of different projects, my paradigm had to shift and say, look, we are creating an opportunity for somebody to make money or to have a unique experience. The end result is to make a movie. The side effect might be that they make money. So I have to often remind myself how great this is, that we are like the product that we are pitching. We're reaching out to an angel investor or somebody that wants a new experience. And again, if we make it about ourselves, will you give me money? Can we do this again? Please, can I do this? Then I think we're at a disadvantage. We say, look at this amazing fund I have. And this is a unique experience and a unique opportunity. Look at these fun photos we've had on set. This is what I am selling,
Hmm.
right? And would you like to join us in this experience? Here's
Yeah.
how we make money doing it, but this is the experience too. So that's an important mindset to have now when we're reaching out to people.
Yeah, and there's a trick or a strategy you can implement here as well, in the idea of you kind of want to stress test your pitch. You want to know that it's a good investment, right? That the people you're going to ultimately meet with are going to respond positively to the thing you're presenting. And one way you can do that is talk to investors and say, "Hey, this is a project I'm going to be fundraising on soon. I would love to get your feedback on it,
Mm-hmm.
to see what you think." And that's a really easy way in for people who are a little bit hesitant to start talking about money and asking for money. We'll just ask for feedback. And then if the conversation goes well and they go, "Wow, this looks really cool, really fun. You've put together a great deck. I get it. I see what you're doing. That's very cool." Then it's a really easy opportunity to say, "Well, okay, I mean, I wasn't planning on asking you this, but is it crazy to think that you'd be interested in this?" And if they say no, then you've got an opening, right? And you can say, "Well, awesome. What would that look like for you, or what would you be interested in?" They might even be first money in. So I do this on a lot of projects where ultimately down the line, I might be asking for a partnership or an investment, but I'll just go to people who I know would be a perfect fit and say, "Can I just get your feedback on this? I'm not raising money yet. I haven't launched this yet, but I would like your feedback." And what you end up with a lot of times is partners or people who can support you in some way or another. And that's a really cool strategy to implement that also helps you stress test the pitch to make sure you're going out to the market with something that is actually viable, as opposed to a passion project that has nothing interesting about it to an investor.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that mindset. I think too, I wanted to throw in this thought. I was talking with an investor the other day. He's a gentleman who he raised a fund, like a venture fund, from a bunch of banks. And so like,
Oh,
he's
wow.
just a dude that knows how to raise money and has done it and he's successful, right?
Yeah.
And so I was talking to him and I said the phrase, "Well, I don't want to be too opportunistic or seem too opportunistic." He's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You have to be opportunistic. You have to find every little wedge gap that you can find and exploit it. You have to be opportunistic. That is the whole game." And
Yeah.
that was a nice reframe for me of like, oh, I'm being too hesitant, too timid about this process. And I need to be bold and I need to go in and be confident in what I'm doing and know that it's a good investment. That's a sound thing, that it's been stress tested, and I'm seeking and creating opportunities. I'm being very opportunistic, but in the best way possible. So
I,
that's a nice reframe for people too.
yeah, that's such an important mindset. And again, I think the reality of independent film is that, and I have to say this so carefully, that it is not a competitive investment it's not a safe investment. It's very, very high risk investment. That being said, it is a unique and incredible opportunity, right? And so I think that there's those two level things, like being opportunistic or being focused on the investment. That's great. Recognize, be confident in the investment. I love when people ask me, like, well, how do you make money in film? And I mean, that just opens the door to like talk about these things. And I could talk about that all day long. But I'm also very, very transparent. Is, you know, if we're not a real estate, we don't compete with real estate. If we're raising money from banks, that's just not our thing. And Darren, I may be just speaking from my own experience. You're raising a fund, which is entirely different, I think, which potentially does have that potential as being a good investment. One-off films are an incredible opportunity to make a movie, and they might make money.
Yeah, well said. I think that's a great segue into kind of the last bit. What you already talked about, it's the mindset piece. But I want to take what you just said and apply that as well. Because I think a lot of people look at others who are raising money and go, man, how are they doing it? And skipping over the fact that you've raised money 8 times, you've done 8 movies, you've had movies in theaters, you've done this. There's a trajectory of your career that people can look at and go, oh, he did a $125,000 movie, and then a 200, and then a 250, and then a 500, and then a million, and then a 2 million. And like, you can see the trajectory. So it makes sense if you go out for your next project and say, this is a $2.5 million budget. People aren't going to go, what are you talking about? Like, it makes sense because you've drawn a line with your career, and they're not just investing in a single project. They're investing in the trajectory that you've already been on, and they can see where that trajectory leads. So this idea of dots versus lines, that was something that someone shared at one of these events I went to. And they said investors don't invest in dots, they invest in lines. And I was like, what are they talking about? And then he explained it. I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea. It's a lot harder to raise money for dots, meaning single projects, one off projects.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a single project you're raising for your first short film or your first feature film, and you don't have anything that came before it, that's a harder sell. It just is. Compared to a producer who's done 4 movies in the last 3 years, and 2 of them were just in theaters, and 3 out of the 4 have been in theaters, and like successful outcomes all around, that's a lot easier to go and raise money for the next thing because I have these lines, these dots that are connected into lines that are an upward trajectory, and you can see where it's going next. And so, what I would recommend is create some dots. Like, go out and do some short films for free. Like, don't raise money, just go do 1 or 2 for free and put them in festivals and win some awards and get good feedback and get a million views on YouTube or whatever it looks like, to show that, like, here's where I've been and here's where I am today and this is where I'm going. And then investors can see a line and go, oh, great, I'm investing in someone who's going to be going that way whether or not I invest. Like, that train is headed to that destination. Do I want to get on that train or not? And the idea of the train is a good one, because if it's a moving train that's just like stopping to pick up passengers and like, everybody get on, we're leaving in 2 minutes, and like you go, that's very different than, hey guys, so I want to build a train and I've already got the wheels on the tracks, but I need every other part. And then once we've built the train, I'm going to need you to get behind the train and push it, because there's zero momentum and there's zero resources and there's nothing built yet. Which one is an easier sell? That's the difference between dots and lines. And investors rarely want to help you build the train and then get behind and push it. So you got
Yeah.
to do some of that work yourself before you start raising money.
An important aspect of that is to not give up.
Yeah.
Darren, you talked about doing these short films and then the 125,000, then a $250,000, and that is, I mean, that's a way to do it. It's a track record. Very, very, it's been a long slog, and for which I'm very, very grateful. But I have to remind myself not to give up. Like, and yes, those dots lead to lines. Like, they are gonna. It's kind of all the principles that we've talked about on the podcast about building your audience, right? Even on those first, films where I'm doing short films and getting my friends together to make a movie, and we don't have any money, or I'm putting my own, funds into it. I'm still building an audience, like building a following, and having those meetings with investors. I'm not doing a short film without having a feature film script. So when somebody says, "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're making a movie or whatever it is," I could say, "Yeah, we've got a feature, and our goal is to do this next year. Can we come to you when we're looking for money? Yes or no? That's fine. No, okay, great. Can we add you to our list? And we'll just keep you posted on projects we're doing." Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Great. And we're building an audience that helps us when we do want to raise money, we can do it.
Yeah. It's a great place to end on, which is don't give up. Like keep going until it happens. Right. And share this story all the time. It took me 12 years to produce my first feature film. 12 years. And I owe a lot of the success of that, the fact that I got hired, to the reality that I just didn't give up for 12 years. I kept at it. I kept trying to do projects. I kept taking gigs. I kept honing my craft as a producer until it happened. And the trajectory changed at that point. Now I'm on a different trajectory. So it's something that you just have to say, I'm going to keep going until I have it, until it happens, until the outcome has been achieved. And I don't know how to give people that other than to say, you have to have that. Like that's required.
It's tough. Somebody chatted with me the other week. They just graduated from school and they're coming down and just kind of moved into my neighborhood. And so they recognized me and stopped me and said, "Wait, aren't you? So can we talk?" And chatted with them. And they said, how do we get, like, what's your story? How do you get from here to there? And everybody's is going to be different, but that is that element of, hey, if you're in it for the long haul, great. It's a fun and amazing career with tons of opportunities. Don't give up.
And one other thought for that, because I know that there are actors and directors and writers and producers that are listening to this podcast. I honestly think it's harder to raise money as an actor or raise money as a director for a project. I think you have to, let me say that differently. I think it's harder to get to the point where you're working on projects you want to work on as an actor and a director than it is as a producer. And so part of the mindset is thinking like a producer and taking on that role and responsibility and saying, okay, this project is going to happen not because I found a producer who wants to help me raise money. It's because I took on the responsibility of being the producer and raising the money. And so now I am a producer.
Mm.
And I think that is a shortcut to get where you want to go faster by not waiting around for someone else to help you. If you take on that responsibility, well, you doubled your revenue because you're not splitting it with a producing partner, but also you are taking control of the outcomes that you want instead of waiting for people to give you those outcomes.
Amazing, Darren. What a
Mm-hmm.
discussion. I'm motivated. Like, I'm motivated now. I got a whole page of LinkedIn that I got to directly DM. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly?
Uh-huh. Yeah, go back and listen to the podcast. But yes.
No, but I am, and it's tough. And every week I look forward to our conversations because it reminds me of the just step by step process, and you just take the steps, and something will happen. You don't know how it always does, but something will happen.
Yeah. Amazing. Hopefully that's helpful. Please let us know your thoughts and what questions do you have from this episode. Hit us up, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast. You can ask questions there. You can find us online. We love hearing your questions. So we'll be back next week with another one. Thanks, Garrett.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast. and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.